My name is Claire Sterling. I'm 36, and I was standing perfectly still on the sidewalk, watching 16 years of my life strewn across the perfect green grass of our front yard like so much trash. After a 16-year marriage, my husband Julian had simply discarded me while I was away at my dying grandmother's bedside. What he didn't realize was that I'd spent years preparing for this exact moment of betrayal. The house he believed was our only major asset, it was just one small part of a much larger picture. The joint accounts he had absolute control over, they were merely decoys. As I summoned an Uber on my phone, a small, genuine smile touched my lips. Let the games begin. Before I get into the rest of my story, I'm always curious where people are watching from. This kind of family betrayal can happen anywhere in the world, can't it? If this story about a calculated response to a husband's shocking cruelty resonates with you, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. It took me a long time to build up the nerve to share this, and every bit of your support is deeply meaningful. Please subscribe to follow my journey from being thrown out onto the lawn to taking back my power in a way my husband never, ever saw coming. To anyone looking in from the outside, Julian and I had a flawless marriage. He was a celebrated cardiothoracic surgeon at St. Jude's Medical Center, with an income well into the seven figures, admired by his peers and beloved by his patients. I was the devoted, supportive wife, the woman who had been by his side since we were sophomores at Georgetown. Our life in a sprawling 5-bedroom colonial home in the exclusive Willow Creek Estates was the object of everyone's envy. But the reality behind our closed doors was a starkly different narrative. We first met at a campus charity event when I was just 19. Julian, with his disarming smile and clear-eyed ambition, completely captivated me. I was a finance major while he was on the pre-med track. Those initial years were pure magic. I'd run flashcards with him for his science exams while he'd bring me coffee during my all-night study sessions in the library. We spoke endlessly of building an empire together. Equal partners, he'd always say. When he was accepted into a top-tier medical school, I picked up extra jobs to help support us, pouring everything I had into our shared dream. "You're investing in our future, Claire," he would tell me, kissing my forehead. "Once I'm established, you'll never have to think about money again." I graduated with high honors and secured a coveted analyst position at Summit Wealth Management. My career took off. By the time I was 26, I was managing portfolios for a roster of high net worth clients, and my boss was openly talking about a path to partnership for me. Then Julian finished his residency and was invited to join an elite private practice. And just like that, everything changed. The wife of Dr. Croft can't be working 60-hour weeks, he insisted one evening. The other surgeons' wives are the ones who manage our social lives. It reflects badly on me when you're always unavailable. At first, I pushed back. I've worked too hard for this. I can't just give up my career. It's not giving up, he'd counter smoothly. It's an evolution. And besides, we don't need your income anymore. Slowly, I started to give in. I reduced my hours, then shifted to a consulting role, and eventually I was working with only a small handful of clients from home. In the meantime, our social calendar exploded with charity galas, hospital fundraisers, and events at the country club. I was transformed into the perfect, elegant accessory on Julian's arm. His control didn't stop at my career. Julian insisted on handling all our finances, claiming that despite my professional background, I was too emotional about money. He would meticulously scrutinize every one of my credit card statements while dropping thousands on a new set of golf clubs without a word of discussion. My wardrobe had to pass his inspection. "That dress makes you look frumpy, Claire. My colleagues will think I can't afford to dress you properly." My friends began to vanish from my life. My best friend Jessica was too negative. My college buddy Ryan was obviously trying to hit on you. My old roommate Kristen was a bad influence with her talk of divorce. One by one, he chipped away at my support system until it was gone. I didn't even see it happening until I was completely isolated. Julian had built a magnificent gilded cage, and I had unknowingly handed him the tools to do it. The first real crack in that perfect facade appeared 4 years ago. A text message lit up his phone while he was in the shower. The sender was Chloe V. The message preview read, "Can't wait to feel your hands on me again." A cold dread filled my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Chloe Vance was a nurse practitioner in his department. They worked together. Maybe the message was about some new patient procedure. But then came the other signs. Unexplained charges on the credit card. Weekend medical conferences that I couldn't find any record of online. Late nights at the hospital that didn't align with the surgical schedule I could see on the hospital's portal. The faint scent of a perfume I didn't wear. A smear of lipstick on a collar that wasn't my shade. A receipt from the Westlake Grand Hotel, just a 15-minute drive from our house. As the evidence mounted, Julian became more and more critical of me. My cooking was suddenly bland. I had put on a few pounds. I wasn't engaging enough at dinner parties. When I suggested we see a couples therapist, he just laughed. "You're just being paranoid." This is why doctors should never marry other doctors. All that medical knowledge makes you hypochondriacs about your relationships too. His mother, Beatrice, was my most relentless critic, a constant shadow in my life. A former local beauty queen who prided herself on never having worked a day, she lived 20 minutes away and would show up at our house unannounced. "Claire, dear, this casserole is a bit dry, don't you think?" Julian always adored my version with the heavy cream. Or, "Those trousers aren't very flattering on your figure, darling. Julian works so incredibly hard. He deserves to come home to a wife who puts in an effort." Julian never once defended me. "She means well," he would say with a shrug. "She just wants what's best for us." His sister, Olivia, was different. During a rare moment alone at a family barbecue about 3 years ago, she cornered me near the pool house. "He's doing it again, you know," she whispered, nervously glancing back towards the patio. "Doing what?" "The same thing he did to Sarah." I froze. "Who's Sarah?" Olivia's eyes widened in shock. "He never told you about his first wife? They were married for 2 years when he was in his first years of med school. She paid for his tuition. Then he just got rid of her, left her with nothing." Before she could say more, Julian appeared, draping a possessive arm around my waist. Olivia quickly backed away and he steered me towards the house. "What was that about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, nothing important. Olivia just loves to stir up drama." That night, as I lay awake next to him, I studied his sleeping face. Who was this man I had married? And what was he truly capable of? Despite my growing doubts, we kept up the perfect image. At the Willow Creek Country Club, we were the golden couple. At hospital functions, other doctors' wives would ask for my advice on decorators and caterers. At local charity events, we would make generous donations and smile for the cameras. But behind that smile, I was quietly cataloging every piece of evidence and calculating every risk. Something in Julian's attitude had changed. He was becoming more brazen, more secure in his position and his assets. I discovered that a prenuptial agreement I'd signed had been subtly amended with a postnuptial clause during a blizzard of paperwork he had me sign when we refinanced the house. My suspicions went into overdrive when he started suggesting that I didn't need my own separate financial accounts. "Why don't we just consolidate everything? It's so much more efficient." I would just smile and nod, playing the part of the trusting, naive wife, all while recognizing the trap he was carefully laying. Julian was methodically preparing to leave me with absolutely nothing, and he was convinced I was too clueless to see it coming. The moment that turned my suspicion into a concrete plan of action came 3 years ago. I was reviewing our tax returns, a task Julian always had me do. I spotted major discrepancies. A significant amount of income was missing, and there were deductions for property taxes on addresses I had never heard of. "Oh, those are just investment properties held through my medical corporation," he explained dismissively when I asked. "The accountant handles all of that. It's nothing you need to worry about." But I did worry. I started a new routine. While he was at the hospital, I would use my phone to take high-resolution photos of every financial document I could find. I created password-protected folders and backed them up to multiple secure cloud accounts. I needed irrefutable proof of our marital assets before they could mysteriously vanish into thin air. Fate stepped in about 2 months later at a high-end department store. I was there to pick up a suit that Julian had tailored when a woman approached me in the parking garage. "You're Claire Sterling, aren't you?" she asked. She was attractive, probably in her early 40s, with cautious, weary eyes. "Yes." "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, but I feel like I do. My name is Sarah Kent. I was Julian's first wife." My heart started hammering in my chest as I remembered Olivia's hushed warning. "I debated whether to approach you for years," Sarah continued, her voice soft but firm. "But seeing you today, I just can't stay quiet any longer. Tell me, has he started hiding money from you yet?" We ended up talking for 2 hours at a nearby coffee shop. Sarah told me everything. She had supported Julian through his first 2 grueling years of medical school, working 2 jobs to keep them afloat while he studied. The moment he secured substantial medical school loans in his own name, he filed for divorce, claiming they had simply grown apart. The loans were his alone. Their small starter home was sold, and Julian took all the proceeds, claiming it was repayment for his career sacrifices. He had left her with nothing but crushing debt. "He's brilliant and utterly charming," Sarah said, stirring a coffee she hadn't touched. "But he views relationships as transactions. The moment your value to him diminishes, or he finds what he thinks is a better option, he will discard you without a shred of remorse." That same evening, I began researching divorce attorneys who specialized in high-asset cases and found Isabella Rossi. Her firm's website was filled with testimonials from clients who had been in situations just like mine. I scheduled a consultation, making sure to pay the fee in cash. Isabella's office was discreet, tucked away in a downtown high-rise. She listened patiently and without judgment as I laid out my suspicions and the evidence I had gathered so far. "You're already smarter than most of the people who walk through that door," she said when I had finished. "They usually wait until they're locked out of the house and their credit cards are frozen. If you're right about your husband, we have to proceed very carefully. Gathering evidence without tipping him off is going to be critical." She gave me a checklist: document every known asset, secure all personal paperwork, establish credit in my own name, open separate bank accounts, and build a financial safety net. But most importantly, she stressed, I had to maintain the facade. "The element of surprise is the only real advantage you have against a man like your husband," she warned. "The second he knows you're preparing to leave, he will move at lightning speed to cut off every resource you have." That night, I created a new secure email address and began my double life. My first call was to my grandmother, Evelyn, who had always fiercely maintained her own financial independence despite my grandfather's considerable wealth. She wired me $25,000 from a personal account he had never known about. "Every woman needs a fuck-off fund, Claire," she told me bluntly over the phone. "I've had one for 60 years. Thank God I never had to use it, but it gave me the security to always speak my mind." I opened new accounts at a bank Julian had never used, using a private mailbox address for all correspondence. I began diverting small sums from a personal inheritance that had remained solely in my name, converting the money to cash, and then depositing it into my new accounts. My background in finance was proving to be invaluable. I started tracing Julian's hidden investments through public record searches and by carefully monitoring our mail. I uncovered offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, a vacation property in Vail, registered in his mother's name but paid for with marital funds, a yacht registered to his medical practice but clearly our personal vessel, effectively shielding it from our marital assets. The biggest discovery was a shell company he'd named Meridian Medical Holdings, which owned several commercial real estate properties. Julian had been siphoning a substantial portion of his income into this entity for years. According to our tax returns, this company didn't exist. 14 months into my secret investigation, I had successfully mapped out an impressive web of hidden assets totaling over $14 million. Money that I had a legal claim to as his spouse in our equitable distribution state. The next phase of my plan required even more audacity. Using an anonymous LLC I created called Contingency Property Investments, I purchased a beautiful craftsman-style house in Cedar Falls, a quiet town about 30 miles from our primary residence. The 4-bedroom home was nestled on a wooded lot with a small stream running through the backyard. It was exactly the kind of house I had always dreamed of, but Julian had always dismissed as too rustic. I furnished it slowly, piece by piece, telling him I was donating old furniture to charity when I was actually moving it to my secret house. I had a state-of-the-art security system installed. I planted a garden. I set up a home office. I was meticulously building the life that Julian had systematically prevented me from having. To explain my frequent absences, I told Julian I was volunteering at a financial literacy program for women at a local community center. He approved, seeing it only as another social credential for his wife. Good for our image, he'd noted, never once asking for any details. I made friends with my new neighbors, introducing myself as the property manager for an out-of-state owner. Leslie and Mark Jackson next door invited me to neighborhood barbecues. Grace Peterson from across the street gave me gardening tips. They became the authentic, supportive community I had been starved for. Professionally, I was rebuilding as well. I kept a small, select client base from my old firm, working entirely remotely without Julian's knowledge. I rebranded myself as an independent financial consultant, specializing in helping women achieve financial independence. The irony was not lost on me. Living this double life was emotionally taxing. Some nights, I would lie in bed next to Julian and wonder if I had just manufactured all these problems in what was, by all accounts, a successful marriage. But then he would make another cutting remark, or I would find another piece of his financial deception, and my resolve would harden like steel. I documented everything with painstaking care. Isabella reviewed my growing file of evidence every month, helping me construct what she called an airtight case. "When do we file for divorce?" I asked her during our third meeting. "We don't," she replied firmly. "We wait for him to make the first move. Let him think this is all his idea. Let him believe you are completely unprepared. The temporary satisfaction you'd get from filing first isn't worth giving up the massive strategic advantage of catching him completely off guard." So I waited. I kept playing my part as the perfect doctor's wife, all while secretly preparing for the inevitable, calculated betrayal. I wasn't just building a financial escape route, I was creating an entirely new life that Julian had no idea existed. The call came on a rainy Tuesday evening in April. Julian was supposedly at a medical conference in Chicago, but I knew from the credit card alerts I still monitored that he was actually spending the weekend with Chloe at the Four Seasons. I was at home alone when the hospice nurse called about my grandmother, Evelyn. "The doctors are giving her 2 to 3 weeks," the nurse explained gently. "She's been asking for you." Evelyn Reed had raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She was more of a mother to me than a grandmother, and the thought of her dying all alone was unbearable. When Julian returned, sporting a tan despite the supposed conference being held indoors, I told him about Evelyn's condition. "I need to go to her. Today." He frowned, pulling up his calendar on his phone. "We have the hospital gala next weekend. The chief of surgery specifically asked about you." "My grandmother is dying, Julian. Hospitals are depressing places, Claire. She probably won't even be aware that you're there. Just send some flowers and give the nurses some money to pay extra attention to her." I stared at him, and in that moment the fog lifted, and I saw with perfect, chilling clarity the stranger I'd been married to. "I'm going. I'll be back for the gala if I can." His jaw tightened. "This is exactly why your career stalled, you know. You let emotional decisions override logical ones." I packed my bags that night. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, Julian leaned against the doorframe. If you insist on doing this, at least make it quick, a week maximum, and you need to call Beatrice to handle the gala arrangements if you're not back in time." I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Before I left, I secured the most recent copies of our financial statements in a hidden safe in the floor of my closet and transferred an additional $50,000 to my secret account, just in case. Evelyn lived in a small, quiet lakeside community in northern Michigan. The hospice facility overlooked the water, and her room was filled with the soft light of spring when I arrived. She looked so much smaller than I remembered, her once imposing frame now frail and diminished, but her eyes were as sharp and clear as ever. "Well, you finally escaped him," she said instead of a hello, reaching for my hand. I kissed her thin, papery cheek. "It's just temporary. I'll go back after..." She waved my words away. "Sit down and tell me the truth for once. Is he still controlling every little aspect of your life? Are you still pretending to be happy?" For 16 years, I had maintained the fiction of my perfect marriage to everyone, including Evelyn. But something about her directness, combined with the crushing knowledge that our time together was limited, broke through my defenses. I told her everything: Julian's infidelity, the financial web of deceit, my secret preparations, the house in Cedar Falls, the mountain of evidence I had gathered. Once I started, the words just poured out of me like water through a broken dam. Evelyn listened without saying a word, just nodding occasionally. When I finally finished, she surprised me by letting out a small laugh. "You are my granddaughter after all," I was starting to wonder. She reached for her water glass, and I helped her take a sip through the straw. "I was married to your grandfather for 52 years, she continued. "Most people thought we had the perfect marriage. The truth? He was cheating on me with his secretary for 3 decades. I knew about it after the first year." "You knew? Why did you stay?" "It was a different time. Divorce wasn't really an option for women like me. But I wasn't stupid." She gave me a sly smile. I opened my own accounts. I invested my household allowance. I bought property under my maiden name. By the time we hit our 30th anniversary, I had more money than he did, all of it hidden away. She instructed me to open the drawer of her bedside table. Inside was a large leather jewelry case. "The diamonds he gave me for anniversaries and birthdays," she explained as I lifted the heavy lid, "plus a few I bought for myself with my secret funds. Get them appraised when you get home. They're worth millions. I've already had my will changed to bypass that trust your grandfather set up. Everything comes directly to you." I stared at the dazzling, glittering collection. "I can't take these. You can, and you will. Consider it your grandmother's contribution to your fuck-off fund." Her language had gotten more colorful as her condition worsened. "But Claire, listen to me. The money, the house, the evidence, those are just tools. The strength to actually walk away, that has to come from inside you." Over the next 2 weeks, as Evelyn's health declined, we had all the conversations we should have had years ago. She told me about her own regrets. "I was financially independent, but I was emotionally imprisoned," she admitted. "I stayed far too long because of pride and keeping up appearances. I should have left and found some real happiness for myself." She made me promise to look through an old trunk in her attic before I left. "There are journals in there. Read them. Learn from my mistakes." The journals revealed a brilliant, sharp-witted woman who had systematically sublimated her own dreams to support my grandfather's career and his fragile ego. Despite her secret financial empire, she had lived a life of quiet, emotional compromise. In her final days, Evelyn drifted in and out of lucidity. During one clear moment, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is walk away," she whispered. "Don't wait until it's too late to live your real life." She passed away peacefully 3 days later, with me holding her hand. I stayed for the funeral and then spent 2 more days sorting through her house. In the attic trunk underneath the journals, I found more jewelry, a stash of bearer bonds, and the documentation for several properties I never knew she owned. During this time, Julian's calls became less frequent and increasingly cold. He asked a few perfunctory questions about the funeral arrangements, but he seemed more concerned about whether I would be back in time for the hospital gala. "Beatrice has stepped in, but it's just not the same," he complained. "Dr. Winters specifically mentioned your absence. On my last day in Michigan, I couldn't reach Julian at all." His phone went straight to voicemail, and he didn't reply to my texts. A feeling of unease washed over me. I called our neighbor, Rachel, under the pretense of asking her to check for a package delivery. "Oh, everything seems fine over there," she said, though there was a slight hesitation in her voice. "There's been a black SUV in the driveway for the last couple of days. I just assumed you knew." An hour later, she sent me a text with a photo of the vehicle. The caption read, "Just FYI. Didn't want to say this on the phone, but I thought you should know." I recognized the car instantly. It was Chloe's. I booked a flight home for the next morning, a day earlier than I had planned. During the flight, a strange sense of calm settled over me. For 3 years, I had been meticulously preparing for this exact moment. Now it was here. Instead of fear or anger, all I felt was a profound sense of readiness. The taxi dropped me off at the end of our circular driveway. From a distance, everything looked perfectly normal. And then I saw it. Piles of my clothing, my books, and my personal belongings were scattered across our immaculate lawn. My things had been tossed out like garbage. The locks on the front door had been changed. I stood there, motionless, staring at the surreal, devastating scene. My clothes were trampled into the manicured grass. Books I had collected over decades lay splayed open, their pages fluttering in the gentle breeze. Photo albums, their contents partially spilled, offered glimpses of happier times that were now irrevocably tarnished by this betrayal. Even my grandmother's antique clock, a wedding gift, had been carelessly thrown aside, its glass face shattered. As I took a hesitant step forward, the front door swung open. Julian emerged, his arm wrapped around a slender blonde woman I recognized instantly, Chloe, his nurse practitioner. She was wearing my favorite silk robe. "Ah, you're back," Julian said, his tone as casual as if he were commenting on the weather. "Your timing is inconvenient, as usual." I finally found my voice. "What is this?" "This," he said, gesturing grandly at the lawn, "is the natural conclusion to our arrangement. You abandoned your responsibilities when I needed you the most. I've simply expedited the inevitable." Chloe, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable, nervously tugging at the belt of the robe. "I was burying my grandmother," I said quietly. Julian just shrugged. "And I've been busy, too. The divorce papers are somewhere in that mess. Consider yourself served." He smiled that same charming smile that had once made my heart flutter. "Don't worry about the post-nuptial agreement. My lawyer assures me it's ironclad. You'll get your clothing allowance for the year, which should be more than sufficient until you find some alternative arrangements." From behind them, a third figure appeared. Beatrice, Julian's mother. She surveyed the scene with a look of undisguised satisfaction. "I always told Julian you weren't suitable," she said, her perfectly lined lips barely moving. "A woman who abandons her husband for nearly 3 weeks has no right to call herself a wife." I noticed curtains twitching in the windows of the neighboring houses. Our exclusive community of doctors, lawyers, and executives thrived on scandal, as long as it was happening to someone else. Today, I was their main source of entertainment. "I'll need my passport and my birth certificate," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Also, the blue jewelry box from my grandmother." Julian laughed. "Already claimed as marital property for appraisal. After all, anything acquired during our marriage is subject to division, though in your case, division will mean 0. He checked his expensive watch. "You have 30 minutes to collect whatever you can before I call the police and report you for trespassing." I maintained my composure, even though my hands were trembling slightly as I began to gather essential documents from the scattered piles. Years of planning had prepared me for this moment, but the raw public humiliation still stung. As I sorted through my belongings, Julian watched from the porch, occasionally whispering something to Chloe or accepting a drink from his mother. They were clearly enjoying the spectacle, the powerful doctor dispensing his own brand of justice to his ungrateful wife. I found the divorce papers wedged inside my favorite novel. The filing date was 4 days ago while I was attending my grandmother's funeral. I folded them neatly and put them in my purse without reading any further. My phone vibrated with a text from Isabella. Joint accounts emptied 20 minutes ago. $347,221 transferred to his private account. Documented. It was just another piece in the complex puzzle of Julian's betrayal. I continued to methodically collect my most important possessions: legal documents, irreplaceable photos, and family heirlooms that had somehow escaped Beatrice's greedy assessment. A silver SUV pulled up to the curb, and Olivia, Julian's sister, got out. Unlike the others, she came directly to me, kneeling down to help me gather some scattered photos. "I'm so sorry, Claire," she whispered. "He's been planning this for weeks. I tried to warn you." Julian's voice boomed from the porch. "Olivia! Family supports family. Get up here right now." She squeezed my hand before retreating to the house, leaving me alone again with the wreckage of my marriage. When my suitcases were filled with what I could salvage, I called an Uber. Julian smirked, clearly believing he had rendered me homeless and destitute. Little did he know I was heading to a storage facility to secure these items before moving into my fully furnished secret home. "Time's up," Julian announced, holding his phone. "Shall I call the police now, or would you prefer to leave with what little dignity you have left?" I looked up at the trio on the porch, Julian, Chloe, and Beatrice, and felt a moment of absolute clarity. They thought this was the end of my story. In reality, it was just the beginning. "No need for the police," I replied, my voice steady. "I have everything I came for." As my Uber pulled up, I turned back one last time. "Oh, and Julian, you might want to check your hospital email. I hear the board of directors sent out a rather interesting message this morning. Something about an internal audit of physician billing practices." His smug expression faltered, just for a second, the first crack in his perfect facade. "I've been exactly where you are now, watching this story unfold and wondering how someone could possibly survive such a public and brutal betrayal. The moment I stood on that lawn, I felt so utterly alone. If you've ever experienced family betrayal or watched someone you love be mistreated, you know that hollow, gut-wrenching feeling. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've ever witnessed similar family drama and how it was resolved. This story continues with some unexpected twists that I'm still processing to this day. From the storage facility, I called Isabella, who arranged to meet me at her office immediately. "This is actually perfect," she said, looking over the divorce filing. "He's so overconfident in that post-nuptial agreement that he's been sloppy, very sloppy." She pointed to the filing documents. Julian had falsified his financial disclosures, completely omitting the properties and accounts that I had so carefully discovered. He had also claimed that I had abandoned the marriage, using my trip to care for my dying grandmother as evidence of my selfish priorities. "This is fraud upon the court," Isabella explained, her eyes gleaming. "And judges hate being lied to even more than they hate spouses who hide assets." We quickly formulated our immediate response. Isabella would file an emergency motion for temporary support and exclusive use of the marital home, based on the improper eviction. She would also formally notify the court of the hidden assets and request an immediate freeze on them. "Don't expect to actually get back into the house," she warned. "That's just a strategic move to unsettle him. The real goal here is to secure your financial position while we prepare our comprehensive response." I nodded, feeling strangely detached. That house had never really been my home. It was just another showcase for Julian's success. "Where will you stay tonight?" Isabella asked, her professional demeanor softening with a hint of concern. I smiled for the first time all day. I have arrangements. I checked into the Westlake Grand Hotel, the very same hotel where Julian conducted his affairs. I decided to stay for one night while I finalized preparations at my secret house. Using cash and a credit card Julian knew nothing about, I ordered room service, took a long, hot bath, and allowed myself to finally process the day's events. Julian called repeatedly that evening, his tone growing angrier with each call that I wasn't begging to be allowed back home. I let every call go to voicemail, listening as his messages escalated from smug satisfaction to confused irritation. "Where are you staying? Beatrice says none of your friends have heard from you. The bank called about unusual activity on your personal account. What have you been doing? My lawyer says you've retained Isabella Rossi. That's a very expensive mistake you can't afford to make." His final message was the most telling. "You're embarrassing yourself, Claire. Just come home and we can discuss a more dignified separation. This little rebellious phase is beneath you." He still believed I would break. He was convinced that without his financial support, I would have no choice but to crawl back and accept his terms. This fundamental misunderstanding of the woman I had become would be his ultimate downfall. The next morning, I met with a security consultant at my house in Cedar Falls. We upgraded the entire system, adding motion sensors, cameras with night vision, and silent alarms that were connected directly to the local police department. I wasn't taking any chances with Julian's temper once he discovered my deception. By that afternoon, I had officially moved into my secret home. As I unpacked the few belongings I had managed to salvage among the carefully curated furnishings I had selected over the past 3 years, I felt a strange and profound sense of homecoming. This house represented the woman I had secretly become, strong, independent, and prepared. I stood in the kitchen, running my hand along the butcher block countertop I had installed myself, and I made a decision. I would not be defined by Julian's betrayal. This was not just a hiding place, it was the place where I would begin to live my real life. My first morning in the Cedar Falls house dawned with an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time in 16 years, I woke up without the familiar knot of anxiety about meeting Julian's expectations. There was no perfectly pressed outfit to select, no elaborate breakfast to prepare, no carefully applied makeup to ensure I was presentable. Instead, I just sat on my back deck with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight filter through the trees as I planned my next moves. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella, emergency hearing scheduled for Friday. Stay unreachable until then. I spent the day activating what I had come to call my emergence plan. I officially launched Sterling Financial Solutions, the consulting business I had been quietly building for years. My website went live, featuring my credentials and specialized services for women seeking financial independence. I activated professional social media accounts that had been created months earlier, but kept private until this moment. Within hours, former colleagues were sharing my announcement, and 3 potential clients had already reached out for consultations. The foundation I had laid in secret was already starting to bear fruit. Meanwhile, Julian was starting to unravel. My former neighbor, Rachel, texted me to say that police had visited our Glen Haven house in response to a domestic disturbance call. Later, she reported seeing Julian throwing things into his car at midnight, clearly intoxicated. Beatrice began a campaign of calling our mutual friends, spinning a wild story that I had suffered a nervous breakdown following my grandmother's death. Several concerned messages popped up on my phone, offering me support for my supposed mental health crisis. I didn't respond to any of them. On the 3rd day, Olivia reached out to me through a newly created anonymous email account. "Jay is searching everywhere for you. Mother hired a private investigator. Be careful. Can we meet?" I suggested a coffee shop 2 towns over, taking several precautions to make sure I wasn't followed. Olivia arrived wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, glancing nervously around the cafe. "He's obsessed with finding you," she said without any preamble. "He can't understand how you've just disappeared. There are no credit card trails, no hotel registrations, no apartment leases. The private investigator is actually checking homeless shelters now. I sip my latte calmly. And why are you telling me this? Olivia removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were red and puffy from crying, because I know what he's capable of, what they're both capable of. She shared details I had never known, how Julian and Beatrice had systematically alienated their own father until he signed over his business interests to Julian just before his death, how they had manipulated Olivia's own trust fund, leaving her financially dependent on them, how Julian had destroyed the career of a colleague who dared to question his billing practices. They won't stop, Claire, she warned. They can't. They see everything as a war to be won. Before she left, she slid a small flash drive across the table. This is a copy of his personal laptop. It has everything, emails between him and Mother about hiding assets, the password to his private cloud storage. I took it without a word, still unsure if I could fully trust this apparent alliance, but I was more than willing to verify the information. That evening, Kevin Park, the forensic accountant Isabella had recommended, confirmed that the documents on the drive were genuine and absolutely damning. Julian had been systematically committing insurance fraud for years, billing for procedures that were never performed and upcoding routine visits. The most shocking part was the clear evidence that Beatrice, who managed the billing for his practice, was a knowing and willing accomplice. This goes way beyond a divorce proceeding, Claire, Kevin warned me over the phone. This is criminal activity. We're talking Medicare fraud, insurance fraud, and tax evasion. I instructed him to prepare a comprehensive report for Isabella, but to hold off on any external reporting for now. This information was my nuclear option, and I wasn't ready to deploy it just yet. The following week brought my first court appearance. I arrived at the courthouse through a service entrance to avoid Julian, who was predictably waiting in the main lobby with his attorney and his mother. Inside the courtroom, his smug confidence visibly faltered when he saw me seated next to Isabella, professionally dressed and perfectly composed. He'd clearly expected a broken, weeping woman begging for mercy, not a polished professional ready for a fight. Judge Harriet Coleman, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach to high-asset divorces, reviewed our emergency motions with narrowed eyes. Dr. Croft, she addressed Julian directly, these financial disclosures you've submitted appear to be incomplete when compared to the evidence presented by Mrs. Sterling's counsel. Would you care to explain the discrepancies? Julian's attorney, Walter Simmons, intervened smoothly. Your Honor, my client maintains that these are premarital assets that were mistakenly identified as marital property. Judge Coleman then turned to me. And Mrs. Sterling, how did you become aware of these alleged hidden assets? Isabella answered for me. Through Mrs. Sterling's own professional work in financial planning, Your Honor. She documented these discoveries contemporaneously over a period of several years, anticipating her husband's attempt to conceal marital property. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on all the disputed assets and appointed a special master to conduct a thorough forensic audit. She also granted me a temporary support order that was significantly higher than what Julian had proposed, based on the lavish lifestyle he had insisted we maintain. Julian's face turned a deep shade of red. As we exited the courtroom, he cornered me in the hallway. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled my arm away. "Perhaps you should have thought about that before you threw my belongings on the lawn." His face contorted with rage. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you're up against." "Actually," I replied quietly, "I believe you're the one who is in for a few surprises." That evening, Chloe contacted me through Instagram requesting a meeting. Against Isabella's advice, I agreed to see her at a public restaurant with plenty of security cameras. She arrived looking nothing like the confident, smug woman who had been wearing my robe on the porch. Her eyes were shadowed, and she flinched at any sudden movements. "He's not who I thought he was," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "When we started our relationship, he was charming, attentive, and so generous. He told me you were cold, career-obsessed, and completely uninterested in his needs. I waited silently, letting her gather the courage to continue. After you left, everything changed. He monitors my phone, he questions my every move. Last night, he threw a glass against the wall because dinner was overcooked. She pushed up the sleeve of her blouse, revealing a pattern of finger-shaped bruises on her arm. I recognized the pattern immediately. Why are you telling me this? Because I found something you need to see. She slid a phone across the table. His second phone, the one even Beatrice doesn't know about. The passcode is your birthday. The contents of the phone were far worse than I could have imagined. There were text messages coordinating prescription drug sales, photos of patient records with their insurance information, a shadow accounting system showing cash payments for medications that had been diverted from the hospital pharmacy. He's been selling prescription painkillers, Chloe explained, her voice trembling. He uses his access to write prescriptions for patients who don't exist, and then he sells the medications through a contact at the hospital. This was beyond financial fraud. This was criminal activity that endangered patients and violated every ethical standard of medicine. Why give this to me? I asked. You could take this to the police yourself. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. He told me what happened to the last nurse who reported concerns about him. She lost her license, her reputation, everything. He said he would do the same to me. She stood up to leave. I'm moving back to Oregon tomorrow. My sister bought me the ticket. Please just wait a few days before you use any of this. I copied all the evidence before returning the phone to her, promising to protect her as my source. Although I had no sympathy for her role in destroying my marriage, I understood that she, too, had been manipulated by a master predator. Over the next month, I executed my plan with methodical precision. I canceled all our joint credit cards, removed myself from our shared insurance policies, and formally resigned from the club memberships that Julian valued for his social networking. Each cancellation was a small, calculated piece of a larger strategy to dismantle the life he had so carefully constructed. The effect was both immediate and immensely satisfying. Julian was publicly denied entry to the Willow Creek Country Club after I canceled our family membership, creating a scene that was witnessed by several of his most important clients. Our joint donor status at the hospital's annual gala was revoked after I withdrew my half of our pledge, leaving him scrambling to make up the contribution and save face. Most significantly, I submitted an anonymous tip to the hospital's compliance office regarding the billing irregularities in Julian's practice. This triggered an internal investigation that quickly expanded to include prescription monitoring. Julian's carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, and he had no idea that I was the architect of its destruction. Every move was calculated, perfectly legal, and devastating. Throughout this period, I continued to build my new life in Cedar Falls. My business grew steadily as word spread among women seeking financial advice during major life transitions. I joined the local Chamber of Commerce and volunteered at community events. I planted a vegetable garden and adopted a rescue dog I named Charlie. I was building genuine connections based on who I truly was, not on who my husband expected me to be. The private investigator Julian had hired eventually discovered my Cedar Falls address through vehicle registration records. 6 weeks after I'd moved in, my security cameras captured him examining the property's perimeter at dusk. He returned after midnight, attempting to disable a camera before trying to force open a back door. The silent alarm immediately notified the police, who arrived to find Julian drunkenly demanding entry to his wife's hideout. The resulting arrest for attempted breaking and entering made the local headlines. Prominent surgeon detained at ex-wife's residence. Isabella immediately filed for a restraining order, which was granted based on the security footage and the police report. Julian was barred from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. His professional life was imploding in tandem. The hospital placed him on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation into his billing practices. Several of his patients transferred to other providers after the news reports raised questions about his conduct. In a desperate countermove, Julian filed an emergency motion claiming that I had stolen confidential medical information and was conducting a smear campaign to damage his reputation. The judge dismissed his motion, noting dryly that anonymous compliance tips were protected by whistleblower statutes, regardless of their source. Beatrice, perhaps sensing the shifting tide, attempted a different approach. She appeared unannounced at my new office in downtown Cedar Falls, dressed immaculately and bearing what she clearly intended as an olive branch. "This has all gotten out of hand," she began, setting her designer purse on my desk without an invitation. "Julian is under tremendous stress. His blood pressure is concerning. Perhaps we can all reach an amicable solution." I gestured to a chair. "I'm listening." "A quick, quiet divorce. An equal division of the known assets. You drop all further claims and investigations, and Julian maintains his practice and his reputation." I smiled politely. And why would I agree to that when the evidence suggests substantial hidden assets and potential criminal activity? Beatrice's composed facade cracked slightly. "Those are serious and baseless accusations. You should be careful about making defamatory statements." "I have the documentation regarding Meridian Medical Holdings," I replied calmly. "The offshore accounts, the Vail property purchased with diverted patient funds, and your role in managing those transactions." Her face went pale. "You're bluffing." I opened my desk drawer and removed a thick folder. "Financial records tend to leave a trail, Beatrice, especially when someone has been documenting them for years." She stood up abruptly. "You will regret this approach. Family protects family." "Yes," I agreed. That's exactly what Olivia finally understood. The mention of her daughter's betrayal clearly hit its mark. Beatrice gathered her purse with trembling hands. "You've turned my own daughter against me with your lies." Olivia made her own choices after she saw the truth, just as I did. As she reached the door, I added one more thing. "The investigators will likely want to speak with you about the billing records soon. I would suggest you consult your own attorney rather than sharing Julian's." 2 days later, Olivia called to tell me that Beatrice had suffered what appeared to be a panic attack and was briefly hospitalized. Julian blamed me directly, leaving a series of threatening voicemails that Isabella promptly forwarded to the district attorney as violations of the restraining order. "He's self-destructing," Isabella observed during our weekly strategy meeting. "This is when he's at his most dangerous. Stay vigilant." She was right. Despite his mounting legal troubles, Julian seemed fixated on punishing me rather than trying to salvage his career and his freedom. When financial pressure failed to break me, he resorted to attacking my reputation. Former friends reported that he was spreading rumors about mental instability, drug use, and even infidelity on my part. I maintained my silence, focusing instead on building my new life and my business. The contrast between his increasingly erratic behavior and my calm professionalism spoke volumes to anyone watching the divorce unfold. 6 months after finding my belongings on the lawn, I had achieved what had once seemed impossible: complete and total independence from Julian and the life he had constructed around us. My business was thriving, my home was secure, and the divorce proceedings were advancing decisively in my favor. The trap I had so carefully set was closing, and Julian had walked right into it, blinded by the possibility that the wife he had underestimated for 16 years had outmaneuvered him at every single turn. The discovery hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in October. Isabella and I arrived early, reviewing our strategy one last time before Julian and his legal team entered the courtroom. "Remember," she whispered, "let him underestimate you. His arrogance is our greatest advantage." Julian appeared noticeably diminished since our last court appearance. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He was accompanied by a new attorney. Walter Simmons had withdrawn from the case, citing professional differences with his client. Judge Coleman called the hearing to order, immediately addressing the preliminary findings of the forensic accountant appointed by the court. The special master's report indicates significant discrepancies between Dr. Croft's financial disclosures and the documented assets, she noted, her eyes scanning the report. Particularly troubling are the offshore accounts that were established during the marriage but omitted from all disclosure forms. Julian's new attorney, Jeffrey Barnes, tried to minimize the findings. Your Honor, these accounts were established as part of my client's medical corporation's asset protection strategy. Mrs. Sterling was aware of this standard practice. I maintained a neutral expression as Isabella responded. Mrs. Sterling has provided contemporaneous documentation, proving she discovered these accounts through her own investigation, contrary to counsel's assertion. Furthermore, the accounts contained commingled funds from clearly marital sources. The judge turned her gaze to Julian. Dr. Croft, did you disclose these accounts during the execution of the post-nuptial agreement that your attorney has presented as binding? Julian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I believe my financial disclosures were comprehensive at that time. That is not what I asked, Judge Coleman said sharply. Did you specifically disclose the Cayman accounts and the Vail property held in your mother's name? Those were established after the agreement was signed, yet you used marital funds to establish them, according to the bank transfers documented by the special master. The judge removed her glasses. I am hereby ruling the post-nuptial agreement invalid due to material non-disclosure of assets. Standard equitable distribution will apply to all marital assets, including those discovered during the investigation but not initially disclosed. Julian's face flushed with anger as the judge continued. Additionally, I am deeply concerned by the evidence suggesting that documents were backdated to appear as premarital assets. Mr. Barnes, please advise your client about the potential perjury charges for submitting falsified documentation to this court. This was the first major victory in our legal battle, but I knew Julian wouldn't surrender easily. As we left the courtroom, he approached me, disregarding the restraining order, his voice low and menacing. You think you've won? I built everything we had. You were nothing before me, and you'll be nothing when this is over. Isabella stepped between us. Back away, Dr. Croft. You are violating a court order. Tell your client to drop this vindictive crusade, he snarled, or I will make sure she regrets every minute of it. Court officers intervened, escorting Julian away while Isabella documented the interaction for another restraining order violation. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor at my Cedar Falls home. Olivia arrived looking agitated, glancing repeatedly over her shoulder as she hurried to my door. He knows about the evidence you've gathered, she blurted out once she was safely inside. Not just the financial stuff, the prescription fraud, the billing schemes, all of it. He and Mother are destroying records. They've wiped computers, shredded documents. Julian said he would solve the Claire problem permanently if the medical board investigation proceeds. Her hands trembled as she accepted the tea I offered her. I've never seen him like this. He's completely unraveling. Mother, too. They're talking about liquidating everything and leaving the country. I contacted Isabella immediately, who advised accelerating our timeline. We need to get this evidence to the authorities now, she said. This threat changes everything. The next morning, Isabella and I met with Assistant District Attorney James Chin, presenting him with our complete documentation of Julian's financial crimes, the insurance fraud, and the prescription drug scheme. Ada Chin reviewed the evidence with increasing concern. This goes well beyond divorce proceedings, he confirmed. We're looking at multiple felonies, wire fraud, insurance fraud, controlled substance violations, and potentially money laundering. He closed the thick folder. I'll need formal statements from both of you, and will likely require testimony before a grand jury. I hesitated. There's a nurse practitioner who provided key evidence regarding the prescription scheme. She's relocated out of fear of retaliation. Can she be protected? We can arrange for remote testimony and witness protection if necessary, Chin assured me. The same applies to you, Mrs. Sterling. These cases can turn dangerous very quickly. Within 48 hours, search warrants were executed at Julian's medical practice, our former home, and Beatrice's residence. The local news carried footage of investigators removing boxes of records and computer equipment. Julian, attempting to leave the scene, shouted at reporters that he was the victim of a vindictive ex-wife's fabrications. Beatrice was more strategic, giving a composed statement in which she described me as a troubled woman, creating fantasies to explain her abandonment of a successful marriage. She portrayed herself as the concerned mother-in-law who had only ever wanted family harmony. Their public relations campaign collapsed the following day when the hospital announced that its internal investigation had found substantial evidence of improper billing practices and prescription irregularities in Julian's department. His medical privileges were immediately suspended pending further review. The state medical board followed with its own statement announcing an emergency suspension of Julian's license, while they investigated allegations of gross negligence and professional misconduct. As these professional consequences mounted, Julian's focus on me intensified. Despite the restraining order, he appeared at my office building, attempting to confront me in the parking garage until security intervened. He called repeatedly from blocked numbers, leaving increasingly incoherent messages. He contacted our few remaining mutual friends, seeking information about my movements and activities. When these efforts failed, he had his new attorney schedule a settlement conference, where he offered me $2 million in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and a promise to make no further statements to investigators. Isabella and I exchanged a glance before she responded. "Are you offering to pay my client to obstruct justice in an ongoing criminal investigation?" His attorney quickly intervened. "That's not what Dr. Croft meant. He is simply seeking to resolve the civil matter expeditiously." By explicitly linking a financial settlement to my client's cooperation with the authorities, Isabella countered, "I believe I am now obligated to report this offer to the district attorney's office." Julian slammed his fist on the conference table. "You've destroyed everything I built. 16 years of marriage, and this is how you repay my generosity? I made you who you are." In that moment, I finally spoke directly to the man who had controlled my life for 16 years. "No, Julian, you tried to erase who I was, the woman you married, the one with dreams and ambitions and integrity. You nearly succeeded." I gathered my papers calmly. "I don't want your money. I want justice. For myself and for everyone else you've harmed through your arrogance and your greed." The settlement offer, just as Isabella predicted, only strengthened the criminal case against Julian. The district attorney interpreted it as consciousness of guilt and potential witness tampering. A grand jury was convened, and the indictments followed swiftly. 37 counts, including fraud, controlled substance violations, and conspiracy. Beatrice was named as a co-conspirator in the financial crimes. The evidence Olivia had provided proved to be crucial, documenting Beatrice's active role in concealing assets and falsifying records. She now faced her own charges of conspiracy and accessory after the fact. The arrests made national news. Prominent surgeon and mother charged in massive fraud scheme read the headlines. The photos showed Julian and Beatrice being led from their homes in handcuffs, their expressions a mixture of shock and fury. Olivia, though devastated by her family's public disgrace, stood by her decision to cooperate with the authorities. "They taught me that loyalty means protecting family secrets at any cost," she told me during a quiet dinner at my home. "I finally realized that true loyalty means standing up for the truth, even when it hurts." Julian and Beatrice were released on bail with electronic monitoring and were forced to surrender their passports. Their assets were frozen pending the trial, leaving them dependent on loans from increasingly distant friends for their legal representation. The criminal proceedings quickly overshadowed our divorce, which Judge Coleman expedited given the circumstances. The final settlement reflected the full accounting of our marital assets, including all the ones Julian had attempted to hide. Beyond the financial considerations, the court formally acknowledged the emotional and career damage I had suffered during the marriage. The systematic undermining of Mrs. Sterling's professional opportunities and personal autonomy constitutes a form of economic abuse, Judge Coleman noted in her ruling. This court considers such factors when determining equitable distribution in cases where one spouse has demonstrably suppressed the other's earning capacity and independence. As the criminal case progressed, former patients and colleagues came forward with additional allegations against Julian. Stories emerged of bullying, sexual harassment, and medical negligence that had been covered up through intimidation and threats. The prestigious practice he had built was revealed to be a toxic environment ruled by fear and manipulation. Julian, watching his reputation crumble along with his freedom, made one final, desperate attempt to regain control. Despite the restraining order and his bail conditions prohibiting any contact, he appeared at my home at 3 o'clock in the morning, triggering security alarms and camera recordings. Police arrived to find him attempting to disable the security system, clearly intoxicated and carrying what they described as burglary tools. The violation of both his bail conditions and the restraining order resulted in his bail being revoked. He was held in custody, pending his trial. Beatrice, suddenly facing the consequences of her actions without Julian's protection, suffered what her attorneys described as a stress-induced cardiac event. Though it wasn't life-threatening, it delayed the court proceedings and garnered her some public sympathy, at least until records emerged showing she had a history of exaggerating symptoms to avoid court appearances. As Julian awaited his trial in a county jail cell and Beatrice recovered under house arrest, I found myself at the center of unexpected public attention. Women's groups contacted me about speaking on the topic of financial abuse. Legal organizations requested presentations on how to document hidden assets. Financial publications sought interviews about protecting oneself within a marriage. The story of how a controlled, isolated wife had methodically gathered evidence and built an escape plan, while maintaining a perfect facade, resonated widely. I agreed to a few selected speaking engagements, hoping my experience might help others recognize the warning signs that I had missed for far too long. Through it all, I fiercely maintained the privacy of my daily life in Cedar Falls. My home remained my sanctuary. My business continued to grow, now specializing in helping women achieve financial independence during major life transitions. I developed a particular expertise in assisting those who were leaving controlling or abusive relationships. The woman Julian had tried to diminish had not only survived, but she had thrived. The revenge he had so feared was simply the natural consequence of his own actions being exposed to the light. On a crisp autumn morning, almost 2 years after finding my belongings scattered across our lawn, I sat in a federal courthouse awaiting the final resolution of Julian's criminal case. The trial had been delayed multiple times through procedural maneuvers, but eventually, facing an overwhelming mountain of evidence and the prospect of decades in prison, Julian had agreed to a plea deal. The courtroom was nearly empty. The media attention had long since moved on to newer scandals. Isabella sat beside me, her presence a quiet comfort after the long journey we had navigated together. Olivia occupied a row behind us, torn between her loyalty to her family and her commitment to the truth. Julian entered in a standard prison jumpsuit, handcuffed and escorted by 2 officers. He had lost a significant amount of weight, and his once immaculate appearance was now haggard and unkempt. He barely glanced in my direction as he took his place beside his attorney. Judge Martin Reeves reviewed the terms of the plea agreement. Guilty pleas to 12 counts of fraud and controlled substance violations in exchange for the dismissed charges against Beatrice, who had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia during the proceedings. Before I accept this plea, Judge Reeves addressed Julian directly. I want to ensure you understand its full implications. You will surrender your medical license permanently. You will serve a minimum of 8 years in a federal prison. You will make restitution to the insurance companies, patients, and the hospital, exceeding $4 million. Is this your understanding of the agreement? Julian nodded wearily. Yes, Your Honor. And you enter this plea voluntarily without coercion? Yes, Your Honor. The judge then turned to me. Mrs. Sterling, as the initial reporting party, you have the right to make a statement. As part of the agreement, I approached the podium, meeting Julian's eyes directly for the first time in months. The prepared statement in my hands suddenly seemed inadequate. 15 years ago, I married a man I believed was my partner, I began. I supported his dreams, I sacrificed my own ambitions, and I trusted him with my future. In return, he systematically isolated me, controlled our finances, and prepared to discard me when I was no longer useful to him. Julian stared down at the table in front of him as I continued. The financial crimes that bring us here today reflect a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond his business practices and into our marriage. The same sense of entitlement that led Dr. Croft to defraud insurance companies led him to defraud me of years of my life that I can never recover. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I don't speak today seeking vengeance. I've moved beyond that need. I speak for the patients who trusted him, the colleagues he intimidated, and the women like me who may still be trapped in their own golden cages, wondering if freedom is even possible. Julian finally looked up, his expression unreadable. I hope the time ahead provides you with an opportunity for reflection and genuine change, I concluded. While our marriage died on that lawn 2 years ago, I've discovered that endings can often be beginnings in disguise. I have rebuilt my life on a foundation of truth rather than appearances. I wish the same possibility for everyone damaged by these actions, including Dr. Croft himself. Judge Reeves thanked me before formally accepting the plea and pronouncing the sentence. As Julian was led away, he paused briefly beside me. "I never thought you were capable of this," he said quietly. "That was always your mistake," I replied. Outside the courthouse, Olivia approached me hesitantly. Mother's Care Facility allows visitors on Wednesdays and Sundays. She asks about you sometimes, in her clearer moments. I squeezed her hand. Perhaps someday. For now, I'm just grateful for your courage through all of this. Our unlikely friendship had been an unexpected gift from this whole ordeal. The daughter of the woman who had tried to destroy me had become one of my strongest supporters. In the months that followed, I focused on transforming my experience into something meaningful. With a portion of my divorce settlement, I established the Evelyn Reed Foundation, named for my grandmother, to provide resources for women trapped in financially controlling relationships. The foundation offered emergency grants, legal assistance, and financial literacy education. We developed specific programs for women married to high-earning professionals, addressing the unique challenges of escaping what appeared to be privileged lives. My secret house in Cedar Falls became my permanent home. It was no longer a hiding place, but a true reflection of my own tastes and priorities. I expanded the garden, adding a memorial section with my grandmother's favorite roses and a small plaque bearing her wisdom. Sometimes the strongest thing is walking away. Professional success followed as well. Sterling Financial Solutions grew to include 3 additional advisors specializing in divorce financial planning. I authored a book on financial autonomy within marriage that became required reading in several university courses on domestic abuse. Chloe contacted me after relocating to Oregon, expressing her gratitude for protecting her identity during the investigation. She had gone back to school to become a nurse educator, determined to teach ethical practices to future healthcare providers. "I'll always regret my role in hurting you," she wrote, "but I'm trying to create something positive from that mistake, just as you have." Beatrice's condition deteriorated more rapidly than expected, perhaps accelerated by the stress and the loss of the controlling role she had played for decades. Olivia became her primary caregiver, navigating the painful irony of tending to a mother who had caused so much damage. "She talks about your wedding sometimes, in her sleep," Olivia shared during one of our weekly calls. "She actually seems proud of how beautiful everything was. The past is becoming more real to her than the present." I found that I could think of Beatrice with something approaching pity rather than anger. a woman who had built her entire identity around her son's success and status, willing to sacrifice integrity and eventually her freedom to maintain that illusion. 6 months after his sentencing, I received a letter from Julian. The prison chaplain had encouraged inmates to make amends as part of their rehabilitation. His words seemed genuine, if not entirely self-aware. I still don't understand how everything unraveled so completely. The life I built, the reputation I earned, the future I planned, all gone. I blamed you for destroying it all, but in my moments of honesty, I recognize that I destroyed it myself, decision by decision, compromise by compromise. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I'm sorry for the right things yet, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand where everything went wrong. Perhaps that's a start. I didn't respond immediately, unsure if any communication would serve a purpose for either of us. Eventually, I sent a simple note, acknowledging his letter and wishing him well on his journey of understanding. Some chapters need to be closed gently, rather than slammed shut. 3 years after finding my belongings on our lawn, I stood at the podium of a women's shelter fundraiser, sharing my story publicly for the first time. The audience included survivors, advocates, and professionals, all working to address domestic abuse in all its forms. Financial abuse leaves no visible bruises, I explained. Its power lies in isolation and dependency. The gilded cage may look beautiful from the outside, but it remains a cage. I described the warning signs I had missed, the gradual limiting of my career, the isolation from friends and family, the exclusive control of financial decisions despite my expertise in the field. Freedom begins with preparation, I continued. For me, that meant years of documenting, saving, and creating a parallel life while maintaining a perfect facade. Not everyone has that luxury of time or resources, which is why organizations like this shelter are so essential. After my presentation, dozens of women approached me to share their own stories. Some were still trapped, others had recently escaped, and many were years into rebuilding lives that had been shattered by control and manipulation. A young woman clutching a worn notebook waited until the others had departed. "I've been documenting everything for 8 months," she whispered. "My husband doesn't know I've created an escape fund. Hearing your story tonight, it makes me believe I can actually leave." In that moment, I recognized the full circle of my journey, from the controlled doctor's wife to a woman helping others find their own paths to freedom. The revenge Julian had feared wasn't the public exposure of his crimes or the loss of his medical license. It was simply my reclamation of the woman I was always meant to be. My grandmother, Evelyn, had shown me that financial independence was the very foundation of personal autonomy. Through her lessons and her legacy, I had found the strength to walk away and rebuild. Now, I was passing that wisdom forward, creating a network of support for other women still finding their way out of their own beautiful prisons. Each time I returned to my home in Cedar Falls, the house I had prepared in secret and now enjoyed in freedom, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The sprawling garden, the home office where I advised my clients, the quiet reading nook overlooking the stream, all of it represented choices I had made for myself rather than to maintain appearances or to please someone else. The perfect doctor's wife had disappeared, replaced by a woman who was comfortable with imperfection and authenticity. The facade had cracked, then shattered completely, revealing something far more valuable than the polished image Julian had demanded. On the 5th anniversary of my grandmother's death, I visited her grave with fresh flowers and news of the Foundation's latest achievements. Standing there beside the simple headstone, I felt her presence in the wisdom that had guided me through my darkest times. "You were right," I said aloud. "Sometimes the strongest thing is walking away, and sometimes what appears to be an ending is actually the beginning of everything that matters." I've shared my story today not just to describe what happened, but to connect with others who might see a part of themselves in my experience. Family betrayal leaves wounds that take time to heal, but that healing is possible. If my journey resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What family betrayal have you witnessed or experienced? And how did you find the strength to move forward? Please share, like, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of overcoming family manipulation and finding justice. Your support helps this channel reach others who might be feeling alone in similar situations. Remember, the first step toward reclaiming your power is recognizing when it's been taken from you. Thank you for listening to my story of how I transformed from a controlled wife to a woman helping others find their own freedom. End of story.